In this video, I'm going to show you how to debug, which is an important tool in determining the source of the problem. What can be the problem in really complex exceptions or exceptions that you don't understand. And this can be also the great tool to help us better understand exceptions so we can work with it in the future. So first thing you should do is first determine if you have any errors or exceptions. If you haven't done it already, I haven't done it already, so I need to first open the terminal that I'm working on. In my case, it's IDEA for convenience. And in a project repository, I need to type npm clean verify. What it's going to do is going to perform a series of compilations, tests, and verifications to see if one of the tests or verifications fail, so they can give us the information to fix it. And it's going to take us from 10 to 20 minutes, so be ready to wait if you're doing it, and I will be back with you shortly. Okay, after nvn clean verify, you can see it gave us one failure or exception that has to do something with violations and how they differ. Now let's say that I don't understand this exception and I want to more about it, what caused the problem and how to fix that problem. And in order to do it, we can look at the struct trace. So to see the struct trace, let's see the original error message here. Okay, so in the original message, we can see that this highlighted part with the lines that started at is the part of the struct trace, and usually the first line of this part gives us the method that caused this exception. So in our case, it's verified with inline config parser, and we can see that this method is right here. So this method is what gave us the error with violations, and we need to put a red dot on that method that was problematic. And this red dot is called a breakpoint, and the breakpoint is basically causes the program to stop at this point when we are debugging. So we can see all the states and the values that were present of the program right when it was about to give us the error. So when we put the dot here on the problematic method, we can now run the debug. And in order to run the debug, we can see the button at the beginning of the method here. When we click on it, here's a few options, and we need to choose the debug. So it prepares us the environment, and we see that the new panel has appeared here. And here we can see the parts of the object that we are analyzing. So the object is basically the class, and our class has multiple string literals check examples, and it has the parts of the class that are relevant to this method that we are debugging. So far there's a this, which is just a part of the class, and we don't really need it in the context of this problem because it's just binary. And it has the expected, which is this list variable right here, and it just lists us the violations that we put in here, so the line numbers and the formatted message when we run the program here. But it doesn't give us the enough details, and we want to go more deep. In order to do it, we need to go inside of this method, and for this there's a feature right here that is called step into, and this will allow us to step inside of this method. So we click on it, and if the line has more than one method, it will ask us to choose which method we want to open to, like go inside of it. And we want to go inside of this method here, verify, because getPath just establishes the access with the file that we are analyzing, and we don't have any problem with establishing the access. Okay, so now we are inside that problematic method right here. We can see that one more variable has here now, and just the file path, but we don't need it right now. So what we can do, we can step over one by one on each line here and see if it has any new information that to share with us, and we can more specifically determine what was problematic spot of this method. So for this, there's a feature here called step over, and if we click on it, it just step over one line, and we can just determine if it gives us any more information here. So we can, if we click here again, we can see that test input configuration has appeared, and it's this basically this variable, and we can see the value of this variable here after the parse method. And we can see that it has the violations with the size of 3. And if we open it, we can go more deep. You can see it has the line numbers of those violations. But if you look at our expected, we only have basically two violations in our list with this line numbers. So we now know that the number of violations doesn't really match with the actual number. But let's see if we want more clues to just know what caused this inconsistency, why exactly our number violation doesn't match. So for this, we know that the value of this variable was as a result of this parse method. So we want to go inside of that parse method. But since we're already ahead of that method, if we can really go back and debug, you can just simply stop the debug by clicking on this button. So stop, just closing it and just simply running the debug again. It shouldn't take you much of the time, and just clicking step E2 again. And now we are inside of this right at the beginning of this method. And we just click step over once, and now we write in this line. So we just step into that parse method how we wanted to. And we can see that this method returns as another parse method, so we just step into it again. And now we are in the actual parse method. And just let's see what it has. Let's just step over it again, so until we see any interesting details. Let's just tell you, let's figure out what each part of this method is doing. So this one just picks the config, it gets the path. You can see that this config variable has appeared, but it currently has 0 violations. Okay, let's just step over again. So this one establishes the modules. Okay, so you can see this one sets violations, so this one is interesting. And after this method, as we can see, we already have the 3 violations. So this method is responsible for setting this number of violations. And let's say if you want to just briefly see what was inside this method or what this method is doing, and you want to just briefly see without the debug. And in order to just get inside the method outside the debug, you just hold Control. When you're holding your Control key, you just press on this method that you want to go inside to. And now we are inside this method, and as you can see, our debug is still in a past state, and we just can briefly see what is inside of this method. So it just sets the modules and just reads every single line of the file. It just determines if the file has the violation, and if it has the violation, it just adds 1 to the violations variable. And we can see the lines variable here. It just has every single line of the file. Interesting. And let's say I want to bring my debug in here, but I don't want to relaunch the debug and just manually click step over a lot of times, doing like this cumbersome work. And I can just place the breakpoint at the beginning of this method. And let's say I want to close the debug and just run it again. Oh, let's run it again. And instead of stepping into this method and other methods a lot of time, I can just click resume the program. And now I'm under my another breakpoint that I just put on this method. And it's really useful, so it doesn't take us too much time to just move between the methods here. Okay, and let's just briefly step over this and just see if that's some interesting stuff. Well, apparently just the loop stuff. Okay, and now we just want to exit this method and just go outside of this method. But before it, let me show the left side of this panel. And if we click on it, you can see it was basically what was before we entered this method. So you can see the previous state of the debug here. So it is useful to compare the values of the variables and what variables were present before we entered this method. It's kind of useful. The green parts is the methods that we manipulated ourselves, and the brown parts are what the computer did for us. So what the steps that the computer had to do to make us reach that method. And it's important to notice that this panel just lets us see the previous state of the program, but it doesn't return it to that state. So when we just press here, for example, we only see these variables values while our program is still in this state. So it doesn't help us much, like if you want to go back. But when we actually want to exit this method, there's a feature called step out, and if we press it, it just goes outside of this method back to our parse method. And let's go outside of the parse method again. No, let's see as it just basically reverses our actions. Okay, and now let's say if you want to just go more step over this method again, since we stopped at this last time. So it's parse config, and it's just formatted version of the config. So let's step over again. And this get actual violation method seems interesting, and we can see that the new variable has appeared, which is actual violations, with a size of 3 as a result of this method. And we can see that it has 3 violation messages right here. And if we compare it with our expected variable here, we have only two fields here and has the three fields with the 13, 18, and 20 numbers. Okay, so now we know the line of the violation that we're missing. We know the message of the violation we're missing. We actually know that there has to be something with the violation that we didn't put in our expected list. And as we can know from this file path variable, we can see that it was analyzing this example1.java file in this direction. And we can see that we also have this name of the file over here. So let's just go inside that file and see more in depth. So we can see that there's a violation here. This is written on line 13. Okay, we have it on line 13. We can see there's a violation here with this similar message on line 20. We have it on line 20. But there's also a violation on line 18, but we don't have it in our expected list, as you can see. We didn't put it here. So now we know that the problem is actually we either forgot or we just didn't pay attention to it. We didn't put the violation in our expected list. So that's why it's complaining that it doesn't match with the actual number of violations. So now we know the problem. We can fix it by just pasting this violation information here. So I prepared it before the video. So let's say now we want to fix it. We can either do it, we can either see if it has any errors by running npm clean verify, or in my case, I'm sure that I only had errors in this method. I can just use this feature and just run the file instead of debugging, so I can just run it. And I can see that it successfully passed the test with a check mark, which means there are no any longer errors anymore. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comments. And thank you for listening.